Welcome. Thanks for joining us today, everyone. My name is Stacey Doherty. I am VP of Marketing for Prime TSR, and I will be your host for today's session. So let's jump right into today's topic. It's how to improve performance and cost the AWS Well-Architected way. Prime TSR is thrilled to have the opportunity to partner with Inops and AWS on this session. Just a little bit about us. So Prime TSR is a Chicago-based boutique technology consultancy specializing in digital transformation solutions that work with legacy IT environments. Our team of senior experts advise and implement custom cloud applications and data platforms. Before we have our speakers introduce themselves, just a few housekeeping items. We have allocated an hour for today's session. If you have questions throughout the session, there's a chat feature on the side of your screen, and we'll do our best to address those as we go. And just a reminder that we're recording the session, and a copy of the recording and the slides will be sent out shortly afterwards. So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to our presenters for today. We have Jeremy Reiner from Prime TSR, John Ray from Inops, and Rich Boyd from Amazon Web Services. Welcome to all of you, and I'll let Jeremy take it from here.
Jeremy, I think you're muted.
And I got muted. I apologize. So thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon or this morning. And I had a great intro there, but my name is Jeremy Reiner. I'm an associate principal with Prime TSR. My focus is really on cloud adoption and getting strong foundations for adopting AWS and putting solid technologies in place for all of our clients. Along with me today, we have John Ray and Richard Boyd. And John, if you don't mind, could you do your quick intro? You're on mute as well, John.
Out now.
There you go.
If only we had some technical people. My name is John Ray. I'm the Director of Technical Operations for Inops, and I'm very excited to be here with AWS and Prime TSR.
Then we have Rich Boyd.
Hi there, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Excellent, okay. My name is Richard Boyd, go by Rich for short. I'm a solutions architect on the Amazon Web Services Well-Architected team. My job is to enable Amazonians internally and our customers to be more well-architected, to learn the framework, to use the tool. I do that through education outreach, speaking engagements, and also kind of direct customer engagements as well. That's me.
Excellent. So as we go through today, we're going to get a good overview of the AWS Well-Architected review from Rich here, directly followed by a demo of the Inops cloud management tool and so how that can really apply to getting control over your environments. And then finally, we'll wrap up a little bit with some customer success stories and how Prime TSR can apply both the well-architected and Inops tooling to help you find real success in improving performance of your applications and realizing some cost optimization. And then hopefully we'll have a few minutes left over to take some questions from the group. And as Stacey mentioned, if you have any questions as we go through this, please feel free to put those into the chat session and we'll try to pick those up right at the end. And with no further ado, in this case, I'll kick it over to you, Rich. If it will let me. There you go.
All right. All right, can you see my screen?
Looking good.
Yes. Excellent. So we're here today to learn about the well-architected framework and tool, and also to see how Inops and Prime TSR are incorporating the well-architected framework and tool into their practices, right? But the fundamental question that we want to be able to answer and that started the well-architected framework was, are you well-architected? When you build something in the cloud, when you evolve and operate a workload in the cloud, can you say with precision that you are or are not well-architected? How do you know if you're following the best practices for building, operating, and evolving in the cloud? And the way that we've articulated that, the way that we have codified that at Amazon Web Services is through the well-architected framework. So what is well-architected? So well-architected started its life in 2012 as a spreadsheet that was passed around between solutions architects, because what they wanted to find out is, when I'm working with my customer, how do I know that they're maturing on the cloud, that they're operating correctly on the cloud? How do I know that when my customer is on the cloud, that their workloads are well architected? And it was a real struggle, I think, at first to have a framework for adopting those, right? There's ITIL, there's tons of frameworks out there like CAF and others that you can use, but do we have something that's kind of cloud native, right? And something that works for the majority of customers, the majority of workloads. And so since 2012, this has evolved over time into the modern well-architected we have today. And so at its core, well-architected is a framework, okay? This framework is a collection of best practices across 5 pillars, and including lenses, we'll talk about that in a little bit, that give you the best practices for building, operating, and evolving on the cloud. And these best practices are emergent. They're not set in stone. We, in fact, just this year revised the framework and added new best practices and then trimmed out best practices that no longer apply. And we learn these best practices from 2 sources. The primary source is our customer, right? We work with hundreds of thousands of customers, and we see how they're building things, how they're adapting to the cloud, and we use their experiences to inform our framework. And then from Amazon.com and Amazon Web Services and our other brands, we learn how they're building at scale. Like, we learned a tremendous amount of best practices just seeing how Amazon.com is growing and scaled. And so we've taken those and built them into this framework that's really technology and industry agnostic. Okay, like, we're never going to tell you that to implement a best practice you have to click a button or use a service. It's agnostic that way. You can build in the cloud using well-architected and never have to use a managed service. The well-architected framework is also a tool or a toolbox. And this toolbox allows you to have a catalog of your well-architected workloads and all of your workloads in one pane of glass. So if you ever wondered, how do I know everything that I've built in the cloud? How do I know my key workloads in the cloud? The tool gives you the ability to see that in one pane of glass and see your risks, which is the lack of best practices across the board, and see how often or how long ago that you've actually updated that. So I've used the term workload. So let's really dial in on that. In the well-architected framework, workload is the principal object that we use and that we talk about. The workload is the people, processes, and technology that together derive business value for a user, whether that's a consumer or whether that's an internal user, okay? It doesn't matter where the user sits according to the workload, it's just where is the value being delivered and what is that value. So if we think about this in concrete terms, let's think about Amazon.com, right? So in Amazon.com, we have a category page or a information page for a product. In that information page, there are about 160 different services that all go into making that product page visible, that paint all the data and all the UI information on it. And so in Amazon.com, if we were going to scope a workload, instead of saying, well, it's the product page, that would incorporate too many people, too many processes, too much technology, we might scope it more narrowly to just the recommended items or just the people also bought Carousel, right? That is narrowly scoped enough to where we can isolate people, process, and technology in such a way so that we can affect change. Because if you scope the workload too wide, right, if it's too broad, then ultimately what happens is you have too many, too many chiefs, right? You've got too many hands in the pot. You have too broad of a scope, and you're never going to be able to affect change or get consensus. Then if you scope the workload too small, while you may be able to affect change, that change may not kind of go far enough, right? So really defining workloads from the user backward is a way to scope the amount of moving pieces that you really need to affect change on. So the framework itself is built of 5 pillars. The first pillar and the newest pillar is operational excellence. This pillar wasn't in the framework until 2016, and it became the first pillar because operations permeates everything. Everything that you do in the cloud, you have to operate it. You have to operate it securely, operate it reliably, operate it in a cost-effective manner, operate in a performance-efficient manner, right? Operations permeates all pillars in the well-architected framework, and that's why we put it first. The next pillar is security, and security is focused on a couple different things, and it's not specific to HIPAA, high trust, or high tech. When we talk about securing your workload, we think about is how do you handle identity, authorization, authentication? How are you securing your data in rest or in transit? How are you securing your workload from external threats? How are you monitoring your resources internally to make sure they're secure? Next, we have reliability. And reliability is the ability of your workload to operate in a predictable manner based on situations, right? So if it's a Black Friday event, your workload should be able to keep up with that. And if it's midnight and nobody's using it, it should operate reliably as well, right? Reliably is how your workload breathes, right? How it takes in user access and how it scales to meet that demand, right? Just the same way that our lungs take in air, they expand and they contract. And the next is performance efficiency. And this is really focused on how your workload uses the resources that make it up. How do you select those resources? Like, how do you select the type of EC2 instance that you're going to use? How do you select the networking resources? How do you select the storage tiers? And then finally, cost optimization. And this is where we see a lot of our customers struggle with. This is where the product that Inops has come out with really shines. Is where a lot of Prime TSR's work is focused on, is becoming more cost optimized. How do you not just contain cost, right? That's not really what this is about. This is about having cost optimization as a core business function, about being a cloud financial management steward for your organization and enabling others in your organization to really understand cloud cost. So the design principles of the framework, each pillar has their own design principles, but the overarching design principles for the framework start with stop guessing your capacity needs. You need to operate your cloud workloads like a light switch. You turn it on when you use it, you turn it off when you don't need it, right? You should only pay for and use the resources you need when you need them. Next, test systems at production scale. The cloud is a magical sandbox. You can build a simulation of your production environment very quickly and very easily. And you need to do that to test your systems at production scale to make sure that when Black Friday does happen, that it in fact will operate reliably and at that level because you've already tested it before, right? Automate to make architectural experimentation easier. And this permeates a couple of different pillars as well, but you're never going to hire enough DevOps staff or site reliability engineers or security personnel or testers to keep up with all the things that you're launching in the cloud, all the component pieces of your workload, right? There's always going to be more things spawned than you have the ability to keep up with headcount on. So you need to use automation to make experimentation easier, and that means having a strong backbone in infrastructure as code and continuous integration, delivery, and deployment. Allow for evolutionary architectures. reInvent's coming up very soon, and Amazon Web Services is going to show you a bunch of new services, and we're going to show you changes to existing services. Everything in the cloud is going to keep moving and evolving fast, and you have to be able to keep up, and so does your workload. So today's technology choice may not be valid tomorrow, right? Think about a monolithic application that's a Java jar running on EC2 instances, right? That may no longer be the most evolutionary appropriate way to build that workload. It may look better as an ECS or EKS multi-service architecture, or as a step function and Lambda-based serverless architecture. But you need to allow for those evolutionary changes so you don't stagnate, so you can take advantage of the optimizations in the cloud. And then drive architecture using data. You should not make a capricious choice when it comes to your instances or your databases. You should use, intellect and reason and data to make those choices. And then improve through game days. This is extremely important. You should never do something for the first time in the cloud. When you do something in production, you should have already done it in pre-production or done it during a game day. This means simulating every kind of event, from traffic spikes to account takeovers. You should validate your runbooks and your assumptions before the real event happens. So I'm just going to run through a couple of questions in the framework to give you a taste of what we're talking about. In operations one is, how do you determine what your priorities are? And with this question, what we're really trying to kind of dig into is, how do you as an organization know what your priorities are, and how does that inform your workload? How does that inform the way that you build, operate, and evolve your workload? Are your business KPIs actually tied to your workload KPIs and to the observability you've built into it? Security 7, how do you classify your data? This is an area where we know that customers struggle. Not all data is PII, but some data is, right? And in fact, some PII depends on which pieces of the data puzzle you have. So how do you go about classifying what data is sensitive and isn't sensitive? And do you have a run book for that? Do you have documentation for that so that a junior developer can find that out? How do you design your workload service architecture? So reliability is really focused on a multi-tier or a multi-service architecture, because that's kind of become the standard operating model for modern cloud applications. And do you have a philosophy, or do you have a way, like an architectural philosophy, of how you cut up and decompose a workload into services and how those services interoperate? Performance 8, how do you use trade-offs to improve performance? It's one of the tricks of the well-architected framework. It's about trade-offs. There's a natural tension between performance efficiency and cost, between reliability and security, right? How do you choose what to optimize for? How do you use those trade-offs to improve performance? Is it all in so that costs go up, or is cost a big factor to choosing how fast you need to go? And then cost 4, how do you decommission resources? This is one of the ones that I struggled with before I came to Amazon Web Services, is how do you turn the lights off at night, right? How do you turn the lights in the room off when you're not in the room anymore? How do you decommission things or turn things off that you no longer need? Do you have a process for that? Is it automated? Is it manual? Is there no process? And finally, the well-architected tool gives you the ability to see all of your workloads in a dashboard, right? You can view all of your workloads and risk profile. You can see details about each workload, including high-risk issues and medium-risk issues, and then also see milestones. So you can see a point-in-time snapshot of how the workload health has improved over time. And this, as a leader, as a stakeholder, gives you that one pane of glass way to see, what is my risk profile in the cloud for my key workloads? And then if you look at the tool itself, we have in the well-architected tool, we have questions on the left-hand side. We have the best practices arranged from should have to nice to have. And then on the right-hand side, we have additional resources so you can learn more about these best practices and really dive into them. So that's the last thing I want to talk about, is the well-architected cycle. And so when you use a well-architected tool and you do a well-architected review, it starts with preparing. So scoping your workload, identifying key stakeholders. That leads into the review itself, where you look at what you have, you look at your technology portfolio, you look at the workload, and you go through that review process. You ask those hard questions that maybe you haven't known about or you thought about. And then you take that data and use that to improve your workload. And what happens, and this is key, is that that improvement can drive improvements in other workloads. And improvements in other workloads can also drive improvements in this core workload. So that as you go through the well-architected review process, you should be lifting all boats. So thank you so much for the time. I really appreciate it. Thank you for Prime TSR and Inops for letting me be here, and I will throw it back to Jeremy. All right, so you should have it now, Jeremy.
Jeremy, I think you're on mute.
Jeremy.
Thank you again, Rich. And I did it again and I forgot the mute button, but normal. One of the big things that we wanted to kind of summarize on this is those 5 pillars of the well-architected review are kind of the key to getting control over your cloud environment. They're to help you understand and get a better, deep understanding on how you're using the cloud and how you might be able to grow as you move forward. Now, some of the things that Prime TSR does is we take all of that well-architected data, and with the coordination of the tool from Inops, we start analyzing not just your well-architected results, but some of the cost optimization portions in that pillar, and start building that bigger picture so that, as Rich mentioned, we can lift all of your workloads up and give you a consistent way to modernize, as well as take advantage of some of the newer technologies and newer best practices as they come out, with a little less effort up on the front end. And on that note, before I go too far into this, we're going to actually have John come on and actually give you a demo of the Inops tool itself. Now, John is going to be able to tell you a lot more on this, but we find this tool invaluable for helping collect a lot of that data from the well-architected review, cost analysis, as well as just the footprint that is in AWS in your environments to help give that cohesive picture and story for the next steps in your environments. There you go, John. Should be kicked over to you. Yep, you're on mute again, John, just like I did.
Thanks for that, Jeremy. I'm going to ask the obligatory, can you see my screen question?
You're perfect.
Outstanding. So thanks. I just want to thank everybody for allowing us to be here today. One of the interesting things that resonates with the well-architected framework and kind of permeates the Inops tool is this concept of workloads, and we're going to talk about that here in a little bit as well. But what is Inops? So Inops is a cost intelligence tool built for AWS that is directly aligned to the well-architected framework. So some folks might compare us to other cost management tools, and really that's not our aim. Our aim is to provide intelligence to allow you to be the citizen cloud financial planner, if you will, in your organization. And so while we do attach cost to things, we're attaching cost to all kinds of data that we're exposing to you in your environment. So let's take a little bit of a look at how the tool aligns to the well-architected framework, how we kind of show data. We're gonna show some of the features of it, and then I'm going to talk about a beta feature that you might see here called workloads, which aligns. It's analogous to the AWS version of workloads, and so we'll see how we can leverage this workloads construct to provide that kind of single pane of glass view that Rich was talking about. So when folks first migrate to the cloud, or when they first take over a cloud environment, they generally ask 2 questions, and this goes back to what was mentioned earlier. The first is, how much does it really cost, right? Not how much did we think it was going to cost, or how much did it cost yesterday, but how much does it cost right now to run my infrastructure? And secondly is, did I build it correctly, right? And in this case, when we say correctly, what we mean is, did I build infrastructure, did I build workloads that are aligned to the well-architected framework? And Inops helps you to answer both of these questions. So from a cost control perspective, Inops has, so let me back up just a second. The way that Inops works is that Inops gets read-only IAM credentials into your AWS account, we're an intelligence tool. We are not making changes in your account. We're just reading information. We read cost data, CloudTrail data, and instance metadata, and we correlate all these things together into a series of dashboards for you. Sometimes dashboards can be a little restrictive, and so we actually allow you to create custom dashboards, and we actually expose some of the index in the back end, which I'll show you in a moment, that allows you to have a lot of control over what you want to see in your view. From a cost control perspective, and really from an account inventory perspective, we have several dashboards that are pre-baked that you can use to really get a handle on your environment right off the bat. We have an accounts level view here. So for instance, we can see all of the accounts in our Inops demo environment here, and we can see cost data that is associated with these accounts. And you'll notice on the left-hand side here that we have a filters bar. And this filters bar allows you to be the Citizen Cloud Financial Planner and really customize how you want to see your data. And so while we are at account level view here, we can down select on things, for instance, data between a certain date range, perhaps, or perhaps I only want to look at the resources launched after or before a certain date. We import your AWS billing tags and any other custom tags you have, and so you might have a cost center tag, or you might have an application stack tag that you want to use. And when you select any of these items on the left-hand side, all of these dashboards become recontextualized around the filter that you've built. So for instance, while I might want to see things from an account level perspective, I might want to drill in even deeper, and I might want to see things from an actual resource level. And then from this resource level, I can be very specific with things, and I can say something like, only show me things that are in prod, for instance. And so simply by searching for it, now I'm only looking at resources that are in production, right, or tagged prod, something like that. And I can be even more specific with it. I can say something like, just show me EBS volumes, for instance. And now I can get an inventory of just the EBS volumes in my environment. So you begin to see the power of the tool from a, not just from a cost perspective, but from the ability to know exactly what's in your AWS environment, what operations are happening, what are the costs associated with those things, what are the maybe the associated tags or these sorts of things that can help you to get a more complete picture of what's going on inside of your AWS environment. And then from a well-architected perspective, we can even get more specific. So a violation of the well-architected framework, data encryption at rest, right? So we're going to look at unencrypted EBS volumes inside of our environment. So we can actually see that I have a volume, several volumes here that are unencrypted. And so I can actually drill into this resource and see what's going on. I can see its name. I can see what it's attached to. I can see associated tags that are with it. I can also see all of the compliance issues. So for all resource views inside of Inops, we surface any compliance issues that we find, again, aligned to the well-architected framework, immediately, as soon as we can, from wherever view that you're going to be looking at it from. And then we allow you to take action by integrating to third-party tools such as Jira, for instance. And so by doing this, we allow you to have this kind of unprecedented level of intelligence into your environment. And you don't have to wait for someone to tell you that something is going on, or that a cost spike happened, or a particular operation is starting to get out of control. You can see that from these dashboards. So let's talk about well-architected just a little bit. The traditional way that Inops supported the well-architected framework is by writing a series of rules. And so every resource inside of your AWS environment gets scanned through this series of rules. And as Rich was mentioning, these are a framework. There are non-technical controls and technical controls that you have to look at when you're building these things. And so what we've tried to do is take the technical controls, the things that we can detect automatically about your environment, and expose those to you. And so the first way that we do that is through this rules dashboard. In each of the 5 pillars of the well-architected framework, we expose if you have resources that are in violation of that framework. So for instance, it looks like we have some S3 buckets here that have public write access that's available, which is a violation of well-architected framework, but you might know that it's supposed to be that way, right? And so you might be able to come in here and override a violation that you see because you know that that bucket is supposed to be available, but you also might not know if it's supposed to be. And so you might have to click into it and see some information about it. And again, as a cost intelligence tool and really as a cloud intelligence tool, we seek to get all of this information in your hands so that you can make very informed decisions about what you should be doing inside of your environment. So from the traditional perspective, we have this kind of rules dashboard where you can look at each of the 5 pillars and you can see violations across your account. We also have the ability to create a report from this view. So if you need something that's a little bit more of a dashboard that maybe an auditor might want to see, you can use this report level view to see all of the violations broken down and see the priority for how we're going to fix these things. We can make comments and things on this report, and then this report can be downloaded and used as an artifact, right, for an audit team or something like that. Again, we provide you with the ability to search through the index, right? So we can look at this big account level report view and then say, just show me what's in US West 2, for instance, or US West 1, right? We can get very specific and very granular with these 2 views. And so when you're talking about an account level perspective, am I well architected, right? Inops can help answer that question by exposing this information and making sure that everybody can see it. So that's a kind of traditional way that you might expect a tool to align to the well-architected framework. Inops goes a step further in that we have created a construct that we call workloads that is analogous to an AWS workload in that it is a collection of AWS resources. As Rich was mentioning, a lot of times you don't necessarily have or care about the big picture from an account level perspective. Perhaps there are only 4 or 5 workloads that you really, really care about or that you're responsible for. And so the workloads construct allows you to do that. We support the concept of lenses, and so you can have a well-architected workload or a HIPAA-based workload, something like that. And those lenses basically apply a different rule set and a different question set to each of these workloads. And so we allow you to create workloads by defining a query. So you're going to define some information about the workload itself, and then you're going to define a query. And all resources that match this query are automatically added and removed from your workload. So what's great about this is not only are you creating, you're not just creating, a static object. You're creating a dynamic workload object that can that constantly updates. It's constantly assessing itself against the well-architected framework. It can have budgets associated with it that I'll show you in a moment. And so you're constantly kind of keeping tabs on a particular workload. And as you would see in the well-architected tool, you're also allowed to conduct a well-architected assessment on those workloads. And one of the interesting things about this is that our tool, again, because of the rule set that is there and because of the knowledge provided by partners like Prime TSR, we're able to automatically detect certain things in your environment. So when you work with an organization like Prime, they're able to leverage this to more quickly provide really important feedback, things that really need to be worked on. And so you get this kind of same single pane of glass view that you might get if you were looking at the well-architected tool, but you get this from inside of Inops itself. We can also see things like what, again, here's our well-architected summary for the workload, so we can see that for the resources in these workloads, these are the pillars and where I might have violations. We can create budgets for this workload as well. And we can actually drill in and see these individual resources, and you'll see these little exclamation points here to show you that, hey, this resource in this workload has compliance issues. You might want to go check it out. And again, we allow you to click right into it. We can see exactly what it is, what we're using. We can see what violations that we might have, associated tags that we can then go search through and see if they also have violations that I need to look at. let's say that we needed to actually act on that resource. We can open Jira issues from here. We can jump directly out to the AWS console to start to actually enact changes on those resources. And so we really want to be able to wrap all of this up and provide it to you in an index searchable way that's correlated across all 5 pillars. It includes cost, it includes governance and compliance, and really provide this tool that allows you to, again, be your own citizen cloud financial planner. So from a well-architected perspective, that we could go on and on about the capabilities of the Inops tool, but from a well-architected perspective, that's how we align as a cost intelligence tool. That's how we align to the well-architected framework and the different views that you have when using the tool to make sure that you can answer that question, am I well-architected? So with that, I'll turn it back over for questions, and thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you so much, John. So I'm going to summarize a little bit here too. One of the great things about having both John and Rich here today is, Rich started the session really talking about the WAR as a toolbox to help organizations manage workloads, right? And as John just kind of got into, the Inops tooling really lets us consolidate that and to help the data become really a cloud intelligence tool that we can utilize in a single pane of glass. And one of the big things for us as providers and professional service providers is to find these tool sets that help us more effectively and more efficiently come up with recommendations for our clients and our partners so that they can get those tactical and tangible results and something that can be implemented in a very short time frame. One of the hardest things when we talk about cost optimization is we tend to get into this paralysis by analysis, right? We just keep on getting into, well, we can do one change, but it might affect something else. And John, if you wouldn't mind, can you if you just click on me and make me a presenter again?
Absolutely.
Thank you much. So I just realized.
There you go. Sorry about that.
All good.
There you are.
Perfect. But one of the big pieces that we want to try to drive to is whenever Prime TSR engages with a client, we want to avoid 6-month analysis periods. We want to get to that point where within a short amount of time, ideally within that first month, you're already getting to the point where you're saving at least consumption costs or finding performance increases or identifying and remediating high impact risk issues that are identified in the WAR process. So looking at all these pillars and having a couple of tools that help consolidate that information and give us quick reporting to help feed back into the organization we're working with is critical for everything that we do. Now, as we go on, I'm going to go through a couple of quick, or at least one quick case study and a customer success story that we've got. And one of the challenges that this specific client had, they had a product that was completely cloud-based, apologies. And the concept here was they were ingesting data from around the world, really, and pulling that data all into AWS. Now, this is a fairly straightforward implementation of a portal system and, in essence, document retention and reporting and analysis. And when they first did the creation of this product, there was a clear delineation between the operational costs and the storage costs. And as they started getting more and more clients, they realized that some of the ways that they had architected the solution and the guardrails and guidelines that they built around it really caused the product itself to start outpacing the revenue that they were generating just from that workload. So they engaged us to really look at the solution, look at the application, the business use case, and come up with some ideas on how we might be able to find, one, some quick savings right up front, and then two, identify some application inefficiencies or security or compliance risks to make sure that they're not opening up any new issues as they move forward. And one of the pieces that we started doing as we loaded up with the AWS Well-Architected review and started going through each of the pillars was most of the architecture was pretty safe. It was well architected. The solution itself was planned and implemented in a smart way. But some of the pieces that came out were that really the cost impact was they didn't expect to get as many clients or as many documents per client as they built out. Now they started out, and this is what this picture is, at a fairly high burn rate within their monthly bill. They were hitting at around 100,000, 80,000 to 100,000. And one of the pieces that we tried to build into the solution as we were coming up with cost optimization plans was looking at their growth plan. And they knew that based on 2019 and 2020, they had about a 20% growth year over year of cost. Just straight out, that was how much it was going to cost them to keep on bringing on new clients, additional data, and storing all of this. With the well-architected review, we started going through the architecture and looking at the application and the data itself, and realized really quickly that part of this was just a lifecycle issue. We could take a look at the storage accounts themselves and start really just creating some tiered storage to get some quick savings on their storage costs. Instead of having terabytes in really fast storage, we can put it into Glacier and put it into some really lower cost storage solutions, as well as archiving some of that data that's no longer needed in the production systems. But that was only part of the story. Some of the compute costs were all on demand. And as Rich alluded to, and even John, when he was looking at some of the dashboarding, a large part of cost optimization and performance, we usually have this issue where in a traditional data center, we always have to have max of 80% of capacity used, and we need at least 2 of those servers to make sure we have reliability. And in any specific peak period that's coming up, we're probably going to triple or quadruple that footprint to make sure that we can handle the load that's going to be coming in. And that's where the beauty of cloud computing comes in, right? Spot instances, quick scalability, a lot of automation that can be built in. Eliminate some of that overage of having something that's unused sitting there burning on your footprint. You can actually turn it off or even decommission it altogether and just bring it online at need. So that's really what this graph is showing in part. What we did is to help manage that growth cost, we helped them limit the amount of growth in the storage and compute costs by just putting smart automation in place and some quick lifecycle policies. But beyond that, one of the pieces that is really great whenever you're getting into cost optimization is looking at some of the bigger things that can go around, not just the workload, but your entire account structure. And these are items like commercial terms. You can negotiate with AWS and others as partners to get better terms and discount points based on the commit rate that you have. So there's an easy way to get some discounts right off the bat. But some of the big gains that we really found in this environment is going to reserved instances and spot instances, so that instead of having on-demand costs for your compute, you quickly scale that back to something that you're paying upfront for a year and getting a discount greater than 15% on some of those compute. Now, that being said, one of the big pieces on this is that whenever we talk cost optimization, and this is where I wanted to hit earlier too, was it's all about those tactical and tangible results that you can get really quickly within 3 to 4 weeks. And some of that is as easy as just doing a well-architected review, identifying where you're overspending on larger items and making some quick corrections in your environment and architecture, but setting the foundation to create a governance structure that will help you control that in the long term. And part of the reason I talk about governance is we keep on seeing this just spin of the cloud's so easy to consume and so easy to keep on taking new technologies on and new footprints that it tends to get to this point where IT and the developers, as well as even business units, are able to create new resources, which makes your spend exponentially grow. To control that, you put in good guardrails and guidelines to create a better approach to consuming cloud resources. And this is where the Prime TSR story comes in really strong. We always try to make it so that you've got a structure that not just addresses the current need, but the future pieces as well. And that all comes down to clear definitions of what you have and where you're going, how you're paying for those services with your partners, getting good visibility and transparency throughout your organization so that each team that is consuming cloud resources has an idea of where they're spending and the predictability of what that's going to look like in 3 months, 6 months, 2 years, if they continue to grow as they are. And as part of that, because we're going to be working with each of the teams separately and actually tagging all of those resources so that they can see that their application has a specific amount of cost to it, you can actually start getting accountability within your organization so that that business unit understands the cost of running that application rather than it being sunk within the data center itself. And we tend to separate these things into kind of two pieces. There's the financial and governance management, which is really a lot about process, visibility, reporting, and transactional solutions. And then there's the architectural and operational pieces. And that's the bottom half here. And this is where we talk about managing your solutions and getting your IT organization skilled up so that they have a better tool set to dig into. And I just want to comment on the WAR process too, real quick, because we kind of skipped over this a little bit, but Rich talked about it in the very beginning. The well-architected review is a repeatable process. It's not something you run just once. It's something that you continuously do. And it's something that you always want to come back to whenever there's a change in your environment to ensure that you're still within that strong, well-architected solution. But finally, one of the big pieces that we love to focus on at Prime TSR because it's the most fun projects is the modernization. Taking some of those legacy applications that may be sitting on an EC2 instance or even on-prem still, and finding ways of creatively creating some serverless solutions or even just more optimized solutions that you can run on much smaller footprints. I'm not going to go through the entire process that we take, but I want to make sure that I touch on this, is that there's a lot of steps that can go into cloud management and cost optimization. But the tools themselves, that analysis portion, is where we tend to try to spend too much time. We analyze things and try to create these holistic views, and we tend to forget that we want to get to those quick solutions. And if we can get down to that implementation step faster, utilizing tools like the Well-Architected Framework and Inops Cloud Intelligence, we can really start getting impact to the bottom line of how much you're spending in the cloud so that you can free up those resources and those dollars so that they're available for new projects, new workloads, and real innovation in the cloud rather than just supporting what you have today. Okay, in the last couple of minutes here, I just want to spend talking about some of the takeaways. And in order to help organizations really build, operate, secure some of the best high-performing solutions and workloads on AWS, we need to have tools. These tools are going to be of utter importance when it comes to making fast decisions and being agile to bring new products to market and helping our partners and our clients really be successful on making smart decisions in the cloud. And with the right tools and partners, there's going to be so much more that we'll be able to innovate and create as we go forward. As we kind of talk about cloud services, though, this idea of governance, not just cloud optimization or solution and architectures, but getting the entire organization tied into a solution that defines the guardrails and guidelines of how you actually want to adopt cloud services, how you want to build out in those solutions, and how you want to expand and instantiate every workload is the strength of the organization as you move forward. Because with those guardrails and governance guidelines, you can start developing a solution for your organization that'll bring everyone, not just IT, but the business and your clients and customers themselves up another level to really get some strong solutions behind everything. That being said, I think we're going to open up to panel here. And Stacy, I'm not sure if you've got questions on the backside from anyone at this point. I'll leave this solution up.
Yes, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to type them into the chat feature. We do have one that's in there. Let me pull that up. One of the questions that came through was, how long does it take to deploy the Inops into an environment?
Yeah. So
that's
John, if you'd like, or I can jump in.
Yeah, either one's fine with me. Inops itself is pretty straightforward to get up and running in your environment. It's basically a cloud formation stack that you're going to run inside of your AWS account, and then we start pulling in data pretty much immediately. So depending on the size of your account, it can take maybe up to 24 to 48 hours to really pull all your data in if you're putting a bunch of things in there, but we start pulling data pretty quickly.
Yeah, and to piggyback on that one, from our side, typically it's one of the first steps we'll take is to try to get the Inops tooling set up so that we get that single pane of glass accumulating data quickly. And within the first week, we've got tangible results to start acting on. And it's really just organization of workloads and looking at some of the tagging strategies. And we didn't really touch on that too much, but as you were looking at cost optimization and making sure that we've got good reporting out of Inops, tagging becomes kind of one of our really strong hit points to ensure that we've got a way to categorize as well as look at your environment holistically from that pane of glass.
Great. We actually have another one in here. Where in your AWS migration should you do a well-architected review?
So yesterday, right? You want to do a well-architected review before you even start building on the cloud, preferably. But if you're in the process of migration or you've done a lift and shift, it's never too early to start doing a review. It's going to give you work to do. Don't get me wrong. You're going to uncover some best practices that you may not have known about or you might have missed. But what you will be able to do is you'll be able to have a better idea of your risk posture according to best practices that Amazon Web Services has developed.
Yeah, and as I kind of mentioned earlier, well-architected reviews are do them early, do them often. It's one of those, you always want to kind of come back anytime there's a change in your environment. So at any point in your project, any point in your cloud adoption journey, the well-architected review is a fantastic tool to start looking at how it looks today, how that solution starts coming together, and ensuring that you've got a good pathway forward as you're building out your roadmap for new functions, features, or expansions of your solution.
Great. And looks like there is one more in there. Do I start with trying to save costs or by doing a well-architected review?
Excellent question, and they go hand in hand. And I'll take the kind of first stab on this, and Rich, John, if you wouldn't mind just kind of chime in a little bit on some of your thoughts too. But when it comes down to it, cost optimization is just one piece of the well-architected review. So whenever we start engaging, whether or not we're engaged to do a specific well-architected review for a workload, we'll tend to still use the pillars of the well-architected and start building out a well-architected review for some of those pieces, because it is the easiest and most efficient way of collecting data and ensuring that we're not missing anything as we're coming up with recommendations.
Yeah, and the framework is flexible. It's up to you to decide what your priorities are. So just because you run a review doesn't mean that you have to focus on each pillar in order they appear. Part of the key of the well-architected framework is understanding and dealing with your trade-offs, right? Cost might matter to you right now. Down the road, as your workload grows, maybe reliability becomes more important, right? It's the process of doing that review on a cyclical basis, kind of continuing to come back and ask those questions again is what's most important.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Rich, around it's the continuous nature of this, right? It's not a one-shot thing and you're good, right? There's this the need to constantly review things because, as we said, workloads are dynamic. Workloads change. Resources come in and out of the workloads. People build new ways of deploying things. Services change, right? New features get added. New pillars get added, or new sections get added to the pillars of the well-architected framework. So it's very important to not think about this as a cost exercise or a performance exercise, like as a mutually exclusive thing, right? You can use the well-architected framework for a migration. You can use it for a workload that's already been migrated. There's no kind of restriction that's there around that.
Great. Yeah, some good questions. Thank you. I think we're getting close to the end of our time. So if there's no other questions, we could end the session. Like I said in the beginning, we will send out the recording and the slides to everyone who attended. And if you have any further questions, please feel free to reach out to any of us. And we appreciate you spending this hour with us. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Bye.
Bye-bye.